here today, and I'm going to let you take it away so I can go put my daughter in timeout.
Thank you, Ashley. Hello to everyone out there in fantastic cyberland. My name is Kristy Thomas, and a little bit about me. I am a native of Kansas City, born and raised. Graduated from Hickman Mills High School. Got my undergrad at Missouri State. My MFA in acting and directing from UMKC, and went to Texas. Was a teacher for a number of years. Went to LA. Was teaching, started a writing and publishing business, and then here recently I have moved back to Kansas City, continued teaching, and when everything kind of shifted, um, I had to make a decision for my family and myself, and so I decided to leave my teaching position and start a second business dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is something that has been a part of my life as a person of color as well as an educator. So today I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see what I see. Today we're talking about HR strategies for hiring and supporting a diverse workforce. Please feel free to, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I will have some time available at the end where I will address your questions. If you're anything like me, anytime I am learning, I want to take notes. So please take notes. I feel like this PowerPoint, it hits a lot of some different ways of thinking about things. And I believe that that's what strategies, it doesn't matter whether it's in HR or anything else, but strategies are all about having an open mind enough to do something differently than the way that you've been doing it. And so all of that is wrapped around change, and change is very difficult. And we will talk about that. So, HR strategies for hiring and supporting a diverse workforce, taking the second big step. So, the first big step is you have already accepted that hiring a diverse workforce is a positive element of a successful organization. Diversity is not the enemy, it is the reality in the specific place that we live in. And that doesn't mean the specific place, Kansas City, the specific place, Belton, Blue Springs, Lee Summit. It is the world in which we live in is by its own nature of creation. It is a diverse place. And now, with everything that is happening in the world around us, we are being confronted with our lack of diversity, whether it is in business, in theater, in education, in Wall Street. Like it is just blatantly clear that we are still very separated in a lot of ways. And so we're trying to work to move the needle to make it more equitable than it has been in the past. When hashtag DEI isn't trending anymore, your organization is working to move the needle towards a more solid balance of equality. We are now living in a world where it's fast paced, and this is on the front cover of the news today, and tomorrow it's something different, and the next day it's something different, and the next day it's something different, so that by Friday we're not paying attention so much to what we were paying attention to on Monday, because that's our minds are moving faster than they normally would or than they had in the past. And so we have to hold on to diversity, equity, and inclusion as something that we have to continue to work on, whether it's trending, whether it's fashionable or not. Motivated. So hopefully you've already motivated your upper level management, your board and stakeholder members in this movement to diversity, the idea of growing diverse persons in your organization. To have diversity and to grow the diverse people in your organization are two very different things. And one is the first step, which is to actually have a diverse workforce. And then the second step is, okay, now that we have this diversity, what are we going to do to keep them? So don't forget the second step, or you'll find yourself back at the first step because your retention numbers are going to be so low. When the masses are in support of change, it is a much easier uphill battle. I hope you caught on to that. It will be an uphill battle. It will be uphill, and it will be a battle. That's change. That is what change does. Um, that's what change does for all of us in all situations. It doesn't matter what kind of a job you have. That's just what change is. Whether it's change within your family or your friend structure, you moved, it's change. Change is difficult. You've maneuvered the first steps. Um, Continue to make those moves, continue to make those steps. Your organization wants to do better, and by doing better, the organization will be better. And it's not, we're not baking brownies. It's not add the oil and the water and the eggs and mix, and 20 minutes later, poof, everything is as it should be in order to make your organization better. Change takes time. So just be prepared to be willing to put in that time. So one of the first things that I did, I am an academic at heart. I'm the person that's like, yay, a 25-page research paper, let's do it. And so I do a lot of research. I like to be up on the things that are trending, the ideas that are trending, but I also want to be up on data and numbers. I feel like that's an important thing to present. So what I found, which blew my mind to a certain extent. But I wanted to point out the biggest HR statistic that was like, wow, like this is really a thing. Recruiters take an average of 6 seconds to scan a resume. 6 seconds. So what I did was I did a little experiment of my own. I have a lot of teacher friends as a past teacher, and I asked some of my teacher friends just in a big group. I said, "What are 6 things that you could do as a teacher, or what is something that you could do as a teacher in 6 seconds?" Almost, I would say at least 98% of them sent me back like a laughing emoji, and their response was nothing. They didn't know what this question was coming from, what the purpose was, where it was going, what I needed. They gave me an honest answer, which was in 6 seconds, they could accomplish nothing. So, as on this side of that, that number blew my mind. It's like, wow, how do you make a decision on someone's resume, which may be short because they have just finished college, or it may be long because they are done with college, they've had 5 different jobs, they're 20 years into their workforce situation. So, what exactly are we looking at within those 6 seconds? And as someone who has applied for jobs, I'm thinking, okay, so what I did on my end was I printed out my resume and I timed myself. And in 6 seconds, I could only look at the header, my name, my email address, my phone number, and the beginning of my like purpose of statement of purpose. That's what I could knock out in 6 seconds. So then I separated it into sections. I was like, you know what? I'm going to only look at the education section. So I have 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees, and a certificate of completion. I didn't even get through all of the reading all of the names of the universities in 6 seconds. So a part of what I want to address, if we are going to really make a difference, is some of our human resource, um, some of the habits that we have in HR. So let's start with resume bias. Take more time to evaluate your resumes. I was just speaking about the 6 second average, and it's an average. So there are people that spend more time, but sadly, there are people that spend less. The average is 6 seconds, right? So create a new innovative system to give the evaluation process of a resume more attention. And this is just an example that I've used with some other organizations that I've worked with. I call it section sharing. And what you do is there's 3 people responsible for resumes, let's say. If you have 4 people, there's 4. If there's only 2 people, there's 2. But this is the idea. Kristy's responsibility is to look at education. So the only thing that I do is I look at all of the resumes that I've stacked up, and the only thing I'm focused on is education. And then I'm going to rate it. I'm going to rate it from 1 to 3. 1 is this person doesn't have the education that our organization expects in order to be hired. A 3 is, oh my goodness, this person has a great educational background. This is fantastic. And a 2 is someone who's in the middle. They have some education, or they have, something within their education that sparks interest, but it's not the highest. It's also not the lowest. Excuse me, and then I pass it on to the person who's looking at experience. The person who's looking at experience is just looking at their experience the experience that they have listed on their resume. That is the only thing that they are looking at. They rate it 1 to 3. They then pass it on to the person who is looking at the community service. So community service, the things that you're active in your community, which I put more equity. So that has become something that's been more important, even on the college entrance level. It's the idea of wanting to hire and build the whole person rather than just someone who can work. So I have a 4.5 GPA, but I don't participate in any activities on campus, any activities off campus. I may get passed up because there's someone who has the same GPA as me, but they're in the chess club, they're on student council, and they're doing different community service activities. So that may be something that's important to your organization. And then you compile, you look at the ratings, there's a base number, and that's how you get to whether it's the second round of resume searches because there's too many people left, or it's these are the people that we're going to interview. Name and I say, oh, this person's name is fill in the blank. Maybe the first thing that I think is, oh, I wonder if they can read English or if they can speak English. I wonder if they need a visa in order to work in the United States. Things that are not a part of their name. It's just not. So I have an example. My name is Kristy. My mother was born and raised in Arkansas. My father born and raised in Mississippi. And when they got married, they made a very conscious decision that they did not want their children to ever be judged based on the first thing that you see on a resume, which is someone's name. So my name is Kristy. My brother's names are Aaron, Terry, and Brian. Very general wash names. And they did it for a reason. It's a sad reality, but that's why they did it. So ignore names. And the third thing is accept. There are people who don't look like you or don't look like anyone that you work with that still have the ability to do your job. Don't fear the unknown, embrace it. Okay, so let's rethink the resume. Know what you're looking for. I will say being intentional a ton of times today because accidents happen, sure. But I try to make conscious decisions every day, whether it's in my personal life, my private life, or my business life. I try to be intentional so that the things that happen are things that I pushed, things that I worked on so that those things would happen. Resumes are a place where biases happen. I said that before. I'm saying it again as a reminder. But the next thing is to actively work against those biases. Check your biases. When I get that resume and I'm like, oh, I wonder if this person can speak English, I need to think to myself, you can't do that. Your purpose is to look at the resume, to evaluate it without bias. That is your purpose. That's what you need to do. So check your own biases because usually when we have our unconscious biases, they're all up here. They're not something that we're saying out loud to people. They're something that we're thinking. So the only people who can check us on our biases are ourselves. So we have to be able to look at ourselves and just be honest and say, I can't believe I just thought that. I'm not going to do it again. And then you'll do it again. But if you keep checking yourself, eventually you will get to a point, to a passage point where you don't do it anymore. The last thing in this on this side is to evaluate and extend past must-haves for your organization. This is something that should be revised on an annual basis as the organization, technology, and the scope of the work changes. What I mean by that is expectations, job descriptions, these are things that need to change. 30 years ago, the expectation of the amount, now on a job description, it will say should be proficient in Microsoft Office. 30 years ago, didn't say that. 40 years ago, definitely didn't say that. So we have to be able to look at these things, to look at our resumes, to look at the way in which we evaluate interviews, and those things have to be able to move with the times. What we've done cannot continue to be what we do. It just can't. How important is the level of education expectation at your organization. This is really important. The next thing, evaluate, does your organization value education over experience, vice versa? This is solid data to have. Those two things go hand in hand. So what you want to know is if there are 8 employees who are brand new employees and they're working on the assembly line, and then there are 8 managers, and then there are 10 supervisors. So we have 3 different levels. That's something that HR has said, in order for you to be considered for this position, you need to have this type of education. That can't be a secret. That has to be information that you're telling your employees, that you're telling the public, so that when people apply for jobs, they're applying for jobs and they have a checklist of, yes, I have a master's degree and I have this and I have this and I have this. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get a flood of applicants for jobs that they're not able to do, but they didn't know that because you didn't tell them. So look at that data. And now we're also moving to a point where I pose this question. I just finished my bachelor's degree. I have no experience, but I have a bachelor's degree in communication applications. Your organization is looking to hire someone entry level communication applications. I have no experience, but I have a bachelor's degree. And then you have Kevin over here, who has 15 years experience in communication applications, but he never got a college degree. So which one of us is going to be seen as more valuable to your organization? The person with no experience but a college degree, or the person with 15 years experience with no college degree? So I think you have to look at that. Both of these are very valid people, and you have to look at your organization and say, we have no one in upper management who doesn't have a college degree, but there are people who are on the lowest level who have been with this company for 20 years who will never be able to move up because they don't have a college degree. So is experience more important than education? Is education more important than experience? Or do you find in your research that your organization has decided that they are both very valuable people to have as a part of your employee base? Expand the relevant educational degrees that your organization is looking for. So you might put on your job description that a person has to have a degree in communication applications. Colleges are constantly adding different degrees, or they're constantly adding a degree in this with emphasis in this other thing. So I would encourage HR people to go and look at the major universities in the area to see in their area of education how many different degrees are they offering underneath the umbrella of science, because you are a science organization. That is what you do. That is 100% your bread and butter. But you only want a specific degree, maybe because you don't know that instead of one degree field of science, KU now offers 10 different degree fields. So maybe it's time in the rethink, maybe it's time to expand the branches of, well, instead of just this one degree, it's these 6 different degrees, because these degrees are now being offered and they weren't offered 5 years ago, which was the last time the job description was updated, something along those lines. Okay, job descriptions. So conduct a comprehensive review of your job description language. Check job descriptions for bias. Definitely, definitely 100% something that needs to be done. And the kicker about checking job descriptions for biases is, if you don't understand what bias is, or if you can't read a sentence, and you can go online and say, test my bias. And I'm sure the Google will be able to find you some tests where you can test your biases. And it's about reading a sentence and saying, this sentence has no bias in it. And then you get that question wrong. And it's like, wait, what did I miss? And then when it's brought to your attention where the bias lied in that sentence, then it's like, oh, okay. And that's just giving you, as a human resources person, that's giving you more knowledge for you to better perform your job. Like that's what all of this is about. It's about building up your organization. And how do you build up your organization? You build up your organization by the people who are working in your organization. And, start at the finish line and work your way backwards. So if it's the people that are in the organization, then we have to go back to how they got there, which puts us with human resources. The language should change as your clientele changes and as the needs for the organization changes. Clarity is key. I use the word change 3 times in that section because it's important. Change is inevitable. Change is going to happen. And the goal is to be in front of it so that you're not behind running to try to get your organization caught up to where other organizations have already realized they needed to be, and they've surpassed you. The way it's been is no longer the way it should be done. That's just a fact. Rethinking is reimagining, is moving your organization to a mindset of HR documents and hiring practices being living, breathing, and always changing areas of the organization. Let me give you an example. I work with students who write oratorical speeches. I tell them these are living, breathing documents. What that means is if a student gave a statistic in their oratory that dealt with healthcare and their article was dated January 2020, imagine what an article by the same news source would say about healthcare in April of 2020, what they would say about healthcare in November of 2020. So the reality is that if your organization continues to thrive, it has to continue to change. These HR documents, your job descriptions, your job expectations, living, breathing documents that should be constantly being revised and constantly changing so that you can share the information exactly how you want it to get out. This may be difficult. It is a change in mindset. Another star, a part of that uphill battle that I talked about. Next, reimagine the interview pool and the interview process. Be intentional. There it is again. Okay, so evaluate how you decide on who gets an interview. Does the pool of applicants represent a shift in potential new hires? If it doesn't, then go back and start over. Change equals trial and error. You will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. Keep trying, evaluating, making mistakes, and trying again. That, quite honestly, is the nature of the beast. Give the pool a percentage. Say, if your goal is we need to hire more marginalized people, that sounds good, but that's not a number. If I say I want to lose 5 pounds, my question to myself would be when? What I specific 5 pounds, no time. That makes it not specific. So at least 30% of your interviewees have to be marginalized people. If you've started at 10%, you up it to 20%, the next year it's 30%, and you get to a point where within your organization, you feel like it is a representation of the organization, it is a representation of the clients that you represent, but you can't get there if it's not intentional. It cannot be an accident. If it happened by happenstance, then we wouldn't be here right now because your organization would already happen to have a large number of marginalized people working for you. And in most cases, that's just not the situation that we live in. That's not what has you here today. So who sits on your interview panels? Make it a goal that a certain percentage of your evaluators are marginalized people. Don't talk about what you're going to do it. All caps, do it. Here's an example. My last interview, there were 7 people on the panel, all white men and white women. And as someone who has worked in education for a really long time, and I've done interviews and I've sat on panels, my first thought was, you show me what you represent. And what I saw in that interview was exactly what I saw when I walked into that building. Because you can't put on your panel what doesn't exist. You also can't put on your panel what you don't recognize should be there. So I am encouraging you to rethink the people that are on your panel. And if it's, well, there's always this person and always this person and always this person and always this person, then I would ask why. Why is it always the same people? And you figure out what that answer is and how having that answer and knowing what that answer is important. Reimagine your interview questions to ensure they address the diverse environment that you are either fostering or working on building. You want your new hires to know what your expectations are. So again, no surprises. If what you have is presented in the people that work for our organization, how do you feel about that? You want to give them an open-ended question so that they can answer it in a way that really gives you an insight into where their mind is, and hopefully that will give you more comfort to their ability to do this position. Everyone's voice should matter. If you have a balanced panel, the conversation should be an open and honest one. Everyone should feel free to be honest, and everyone's opinion and ideas should be actively considered. From management to the line worker, all voices are equal. So don't have a panel and then tell, it's a vice president and a line supervisor and a manager and then an employee. And then you tell the employee that their opinion doesn't matter, or you tell the employee that they don't get to ask any questions. Then why are they there? And if they're just there for the look, then you're completely defeating the purpose. Everyone's voice should matter, and everyone should have an opinion, and that should be encouraged from the top down. Supporting and retention of marginalized people. So the first thing is have an inclusive environment. This is the focus of this is not on inclusion, but it's very, very important. Celebrate employees' differences. That's a huge thing, and it's not something that should overtake you as much as it's just the recognition and the accepting of. Acceptance is a huge thing in the workforce. Acceptance of me for who I am and what I bring to the table. That's what inclusivity is. Have a DEI officer. If you're a smaller organization, one person, my full-time job is to teach, but I was also the union rep. It's the same kind of idea. So someone who's already a full-time employee, there's, a small little stipend. They're the DEI officer. They meet and greet with all of the new people. They're their contact person. And it's not about having someone that's there just for the marginalized people, just for the people of color. It's someone who's there as the reach out person, as a contact person for any questions that they have, any comments, any concerns, any how do I do this? Who do I talk to about this? It's something that's on the inclusion part. It's someone that will make them feel like this is a safe space. Like safe spaces are huge. We talk about it a lot in education, but work safe spaces are no different. If you're a larger organization, you might have a DEI council, which is a group of people that work to create joy and happiness, within the workplace that make the new hires feel like this is the place that you want to be. We got this right. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. We want to grow you. We want you to stay with this organization. This is exactly what's supposed to be happening. Listen to your employees. That means doing surveys, discuss inclusion and evaluation meetings. If you have an end of the year evaluation, that should be evaluation on both sides. The company should be telling the employee how they're doing, and the company should ask for feedback as well. It's hard to hear someone talk about you, but if you want to get better, then you have to be able to listen. And I put end of course. It's the idea that when you're in college, you get this end of course survey and get the little bubbles, and then you can write a comment. It's the same kind of thing. That teacher is going to get better. That course is going to get stronger because they're getting these blind evaluations. It's the same idea. Make everyone feel like you are on the same level, no matter how high up you are in the organization. The idea shouldn't be, oh, I'm Kristy, I'm just a teacher. And then 10 degrees of separation is the superintendent who I couldn't tell you their name. I don't know what they look like. I've never seen them on campus. Like, management has to be more accessible. The more present you are, the more you seem like just another person who works in this organization. We just happen to have different jobs. Retention programs. Research organizations who have achieved success in building and retaining their employees. There is nothing wrong. When I do research, I'm looking at what someone else has done, and I'm taking their information and I'm making it work for me. I'm really good at what I do, but there are people out there who are better, and those are the people that I'm learning from. And there are people who are coming up who look at me in that same vein. So there's nothing wrong with going to an organization who you feel is a step up in front of you and trying to figure out what it is that they did that worked, and then figure out how you can make something like that work for your organization. Be creative in the pitching of the programs, and make sure that they accomplish what your organization wants them to accomplish. You have to have it together. You have a great idea, you put that idea on paper, it's all said, done, you pass it off to someone that you work with, you let them look at it, you let them ask you questions, and then you revamp it, and then you present it. So the process, you create something new, you implement it, you then evaluate it, and then you make an adjustment. That's how you should be working. And there will always be, you always have to be open to evaluating. And the evaluation is you evaluating yourself in the situation, but it's also the people who are the implementation, how they feel about these new changes as well is important. New employee partnerships. I've been with the company for 10 years, and someone is coming in brand new doing my job. And we're just going to partner up, and I'm going to help them. And I'm their partner for the first 30 days. So now they have someone who does their job, and they have someone that they can come to if they have any questions. And it's just a nice situation, and it alleviates some stress. Be intentional, set goals for diversity and inclusion. Goals have to have clear expectations and percentages to hit. If you set a goal with no end date, that doesn't work. If you set a goal with no expectation, that doesn't work either. No secrets. All of these go together. I use CBS as an example. CBS has recently said, we want 40%. There's your expectation. There's your percentage. 40% of the writers for our television shows to be people of color by the end of 2021. There's your goal deadline. So between now and the end of 2021, CBS has a clear goal that has a percentage, that has an end date, and it also is something that they shared to the masses. There is no reason to keep your goal of adding more diverse people to your organization. There is no reason to keep it a secret. But I have found more times than not, a lot of businesses are doing exactly that. It does not have to be a secret. And if it is a secret, if it's something that you're finding your organization is ashamed of or they're scared, that is a conversation that you should probably have. People want to stay in places where they feel wanted, respected, equal, important, and relevant to the success of the organization. All of that in a nutshell is called inclusion. And communication is always the goal. Communication is key. And here are my final thoughts. Everything that you think is possible is possible. Organize your ideas, turn them into goals, which turn into things to execute, and finally evaluate. You can't fail if you never try, but you also cannot succeed. So be intentional, and no matter what, keep this conversation going. Change is inevitable. You have to figure out what side of change you're going to be on. And all the best in change. And that is from me. So there's that. And that is the end. I'm going to go to questions. Do I have any questions? Oh, I don't think we've had any questions. Are there any questions now that I can answer or anything that I could review or chat about? Someone said, can you hear me? Hello? Oh, right. So I think the most important thing is that it is difficult, and I've done this before, and maybe in your life you've experienced this too. I have worked in fear. I have worked in fear of if I tell my supervisor that I have an issue, that they're going to retaliate. And whether I have that fear because it happened to me at another job and I'm carrying that fear with me, or I have that fear because other people in the organization who have been there longer than me are like, look, this is just the way that it is, and it's never going to change. And the manager is the way that they've always been. And if you say something, they're going to retaliate against you. And then that just turns you into kind of like a worker bee. You come in, you do your job, you leave. You come in, you do your job, you leave. But a lot of people in those positions don't tend to stay. And if the goal is to hire and to retain your employees, the employees have to feel like, oh my goodness, I have this great idea. And I know that I can go talk to Kristy because she has an open door policy and her door is really open. And that's why you want you want management, and I totally get that managers are busy. And as someone who's an educator, and the person who's the true supervisor in an education situation is the superintendent. But I can tell you, I've taught in 4 different states, and in every situation I knew exactly who the superintendent was. I knew exactly what they looked like, and I felt like, and I never had a reason to, but I felt like if I needed to email them, I felt like I could do that, and believed I would get a response. So I think that employees have more power than they may realize that they do. But there's just so much fear that's associated with, if I make a suggestion implies that something is wrong. A suggestion implies that something is lacking. And so there's a lot of fear that's wrapped in employees being able to speak up. Absolutely. Um, Danielle said, do you have any suggestions for small organizations that don't have dedicated HR staff? Yes. Oh, yes. Um, if there's no, well, someone has to be the HR person, whether it's a person that's responsible for HR, or if it's a group of people, someone's hiring somewhere. And I would say that maybe that might be the first step, is that if you work somewhere where there's no one that's specifically responsible for hiring, then maybe that should be something that's designated to one specific person. So that if the organization is trying, even as a small organization, if they're trying to diversify, that it's someone's clear responsibility to work on this. Because if there's 10 employees and everyone is responsible for hiring, but no one is getting training like this, or Danielle, you're here. So maybe it's the presentation of, hey, I went to this work session and it was about HR strategies for diversity and retention. And I would like to, be the person that spearheads this. Then maybe you're, in a way, kind of bringing them to a point where they're turning into, this is going to be um, the person that's responsible for HR. But I mean, that's just me. I would probably work on something like that, where there is someone, because if everyone is doing everyone's job, then there are probably a lot of areas that I, as an employee, don't get to explore because I'm doing 10 different things when there's really only 5 things that I'm really, really good at. And so that's, an area to think about. Tim says, how often should a manager owner address honest, unintentional mistakes made by them to the employees who are people of color? I think what you're asking is, okay, so I say all the time, in not because in a non-feeling way. Roll with me here, Tim. I often say intentions don't matter, perceptions are everything. I may not intend to hurt Tim's feelings, but I said something that did. My intentions are not what matters. Tim perceived what I said as offensive, right? And that perception completely takes over, right? So when something unintentional happens, I think, to me personally, I think the worst thing that you can do as a manager is ignore it. I think that a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, a lot of educational institutions, a lot of businesses around this country, I think that they live underneath the guise of, we did something really wrong and someone called us out about it on Monday, but hopefully someone else will make a huge mistake, and by Friday, America will have forgotten and we will be on to something else. That is just the way that our lives have been working, especially in 2020. And I think certain businesses and organizations are taking advantage of that. So I personally, when I make mistakes, whether I'm teaching and I make a mistake, in my business, I make a mistake, I tell my students on the first day, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes every single day, but making mistakes is how I learn. And my goal is to never make the same mistake twice. So, um, how often? is as often as a mistake like that happens. And hopefully that mistake doesn't happen so often that it's often, right? The hope would be that that mistake happens and you address it and an apology is made and then you move on. The issue is that if you continue to make the same mistake, then the question for your employees is going to be, well, this is just the cycle. Tim, someone says something in management, they apologize for it, everything is fine. 2 weeks later, they say something, they apologize. 2 weeks later, they say something, apologize. And it's like, eventually, you start to get muted, and what you say no longer matters. And we finally get to a point where it's, well, what Kristy says doesn't matter anymore. Now we're going to focus on what she does. And if what I'm doing undermines my apology, then what I'm saying doesn't matter. And you never, as a manager or a business owner, you never want to get to a point where your employees just feel like you're the teacher from Charlie Brown, right? Wah, 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 wah. Because that means that they're not listening to you and they're not in a place of respect for the person who is in management. And eventually that will definitely create some serious problems that are bigger than unintentional mistakes. I hope that helps. Anything else? Any other questions that I can help you with or ideas maybe? Okay. Well, this has been fantastic. Really enjoyed this. And for those of you who are here and you are struggling or just trying to figure it out, just realize that the answers to all of your questions are out there. And 10 times out of 10, all you have to do is find the right person to ask them to. Don't work in fear. Life's too short. So definitely, if there is an issue that you are trying to work through, definitely don't just live with it because it's probably only going to get worse. It's only going to bother you more. A part of being intentional isn't just with the employer; it's also with the employees. There is a certain level of responsibility that you have to your. I feel like all of this goes to mental health, but there's a responsibility that you have to yourself to be vigilant about your working environment and to make sure that you do what you can do to create a safe space for you to come to work to every day. Trust, I've been there. There's nothing worse than coming into a place and sitting in the parking lot dreading the 10 steps it's going to take you to get in the building. So you definitely want to have control over that and own your happiness and success because it is definitely 100% in your hands. So I feel like I'm on
That's
Jerry
so
Springer.
awesome.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm so thankful to you for joining us. And real quick, I want to give everybody your website. It's
Okay.
thomasdeiconsulting.com.
Yes.
So do what we did and bring in the experts. And I want to thank Lee Summit Medical Center and HCA Midwest for sponsoring us today.
Thank
And
you.
Casey SourceLink for always coming with the GEWKC stuff that's just so relevant, so approachable, and impactful. So I just really appreciate you joining us today and giving us your insight and expertise. And
Absolutely.
I think
Thank you for
that's it.
having me. Have a good day.
You too.